I still remember the moment my entire world cracked open, the day I realized my life had been built on lies. I was 23, running on fumes during my third shift at Joe's Diner, when my brother Marcus strolled in like he owned the place, wearing a Rolex that, for once, didn't look like a knockoff. My name's Emma, and for most of my life, I believe we were the poster family for the working class. We lived in a cramped two-bedroom apartment because, according to Mom and Dad, that's all we could afford. They drilled into Marcus and me the value of hard work and frugality. Money doesn't grow on trees. Dad would grumble. His hands blacked with grease as he patched my sneakers for the third time instead of buying new ones. While other kids flaunted shiny backpacks and new clothes, I learned to mend, repair, and make do. My summer breaks weren't spent on vacations. They were spent at home because, apparently, times were tight. Marcus and I shared a room until I was 15. Our twin beds separated by nothing but a ratty curtain that barely passed for privacy. Every penny was stretched thin. Every expense scrutinized. So I worked, babysitting by 12, flipping burgers by 16, and scrubbing dishes at 18. By the time I graduated high school, I'd scraped together $5,000, just enough to feel like a cruel joke when college tuition bills started rolling in. "We can't help with college," Mom said, her voice heavy with what I'd always believed was guilt. "You'll just have to take out loans like everyone else." And so I did. I juggled classes, multiple part-time jobs, and an avalanche of student debt. After graduating community college, I rented a tiny studio apartment and picked up 3 jobs to make ends meet. Mornings at the coffee shop. Afternoons at the bookstore. Nights waiting tables at Joe's Diner. I was running on caffeine and grit, constantly one missed paycheck away from disaster. Meanwhile, Marcus had skipped college altogether. "Not everyone's cut out for school," Dad said, oddly supportive. Supposedly, Marcus was working for Dad's friend at some construction company, but his life didn't add up. His work schedule was so flexible it bordered on imaginary. And somehow, he always seemed to have money to spare. The first crack in the story came one Sunday morning. I stopped by our parents' place unannounced, and when no one answered, I let myself in. On a kitchen counter, beneath a stack of junk mail, I found an envelope from an investment firm. The sleek logo screamed expensive. But it was the number visible through the window that stopped me cold. $847,000. I told myself I must have misread it. Maybe it was $8,470. That would make sense. But then came the other signs. Mom's thrift store clothes with designer labels still attached. Dad's great deal on a brand new car. The sudden business. Trips. The hushed phone calls. And then came Marcus and his damn Rolex. That day at Joe's, he plopped himself at one of my tables like he had nowhere better to be. "The usual," he said, barely looking up from his phone. "Oh, and Mom and Dad are heading to the Maldives next week, so don't bother calling." The Maldives. The same parents who couldn't afford a weekend at the lake when we were kids. How can they afford the Maldives? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though my stomach was already twisting. Marcus glanced up, smirking. "Oh, Emma." He chuckled like I'd just told a cute joke. "You're not still buying all that, are you?" "Buying what?" But he didn't answer. He just shook his head, muttering something about me figuring it out eventually before walking out the door. That night, I sat in my shoebox apartment, surrounded by overdue bills and instant noodle cups, and opened my laptop. My hands shook as I started digging into bank accounts, property records, anything I could get my hands on. What I found unraveled the story I clung to my entire life. My parents were hiding millions and their web of lies. It wasn't just about money. It went far deeper, and what I was about to uncover would shatter more than just my trust. This was only the beginning. That night changed everything. Armed with Marcus's unfinished sentence and the scraps of luxury I'd pieced together, I dove headfirst into my investigation. The first place I looked was public property records, a skill I picked up during a short-lived stint as an assistant at a real estate office. What I found made me physically ill. My parents, Thomas and Marie Bennett, who had always claimed homeownership was a pipe dream for people like us, owned 3 properties through Rochelle Company, a beachfront condo in Miami, a ski lodge in Aspen, a villa in the south of France. Their combined worth? Over $12 million. But that was just the beginning. Digging deeper, I used Mom's maiden name, Lancaster, and uncovered an even bigger web of companies and investments. The construction company where Marcus supposedly worked as an entry-level grunt? It was a family-owned business. Dad's so-called friend was just a hired manager. Every sleepless night, I'd spent juggling shifts. Every tear I'd shed over rejected scholarship applications because our family income was too high. Every meal I'd skip to keep the lights on. It had all been an unnecessary, deliberate farce. A cruel performance. I confronted Marcus first. He was the weak link, always had been. I asked him to come over one evening after my shift, my stomach churning the entire time. Nice place, he smirked, glancing around my cramped studio. Very. You. I pulled out the property records and slammed them onto my wobbly coffee table. Care to explain this? His smug grin faltered, replaced by a flicker of something resembling guilt. Then he sighed, shaking his head as he dropped onto my couch. Well, damn. Took you long enough. What the hell is this? I demanded, my voice shaking with equal parts rage and disbelief. It's complicated. He began, but when I glared at him, he quickly dropped the pretense. Fine. It's exactly what it looks like. Dad's been running this twisted game for years. He calls it building character. He put me through the same thing until I was 21. You're just a late bloomer. A test. I choked out. I'd been scraping by for years, killing myself trying to survive, and it was all a test. Marcus leaned forward, clasping his hands together like he was trying to look serious. His Rolex gleamed under the dim light of my apartment. Yeah, it sucks. But hey, once you prove yourself, they let you in. That's what happened with me. You just haven't passed yet. My blood boiled. Past what exactly? Starving. Sacrificing my mental health for ramen noodles and rent? He had the audacity to shrug. It's not personal, him. It's just their way. Look, they're actually really proud of you. They talk about it all the time. How hard you work. How independent you are. They think you're stronger for it. I stared at him, my vision blurring. Get out, I said through clenched teeth. Don't. Get out. After he left, I sat in silence for hours. My laptop sat open on the coffee table, the property records glaring at me like an accusation. Slowly, methodically, I started digging again. That's when I found their private family Instagram account. It was filled with pictures of a life I'd never known existed. Mom on a yacht in the Mediterranean. Dad at the Monaco Grand Prix. Marcus grinning in front of a sports car I couldn't name. The captions were nauseating. Another unforgettable family vacation in paradise. Celebrating success the Bennett way. Perfect family Christmas, almost complete. The last one from Aspen last year, when I told them I couldn't visit because I had to work. Marcus had gotten a car that Christmas. I got in silence. The next day, I called in sick to all 3 of my jobs for the first time in years. If they wanted a test, fine. I'd show them exactly what their little experiment had created. For the next week, I gathered evidence. I scoured public records, tracked down every shell company, every investment, every asset they thought they'd hidden. I compiled screenshots of their Instagram posts, cross-referenced dates, pieced together their timeline of lies. This wasn't just about exposing them anymore. This was about reclaiming every shred of power they'd stolen from me. They thought they'd built character. No, they'd built something far more dangerous. They had no idea what was coming. The first step in my plan was figuring out exactly what I was up against. I spent hours at the public library, combing through property records, corporate filings, and investment structures. For the first time, my business degree, earned through years of blood, sweat, and ramen noodles, finally felt useful, though not in the way I'd ever envisioned. The numbers were staggering. Beyond the properties, there were offshore accounts, investment portfolios, and bearer bonds. When I tallied it all up, their net worth exceeded $50 million. $50 million. All while I'd been scraping by, working 3 jobs for minimum wage. But public records weren't enough. I needed undeniable proof of their lies and their cruelty. I started with the construction company. During my lunch break at the coffee shop, I swapped my barista apron for my best secondhand blazer and headed to their office. Posing as an insurance auditor conducting a routine review, I introduced myself to the manager, the same one who supposedly employed Marcus. "Of all the Bennetts, they're fantastic owners," he said cheerfully, oblivious to my true intentions. Very hands-on with the business. He handed me files without hesitation. Inside were years of financial reports that painted a damning picture. The company wasn't just successful. It was wildly profitable, raking in millions annually. Millions that could have paid for my education, covered my medical bills, or simply kept food in my fridge. Instead, it had been funneled into their hidden empire. Next, I turned my attention to the real estate holdings. The Aspen House? Purchased the same month I'd been forced to drop out of university for a semester because I couldn't afford tuition. The Mediterranean yacht? Bought while I was pulling double shifts to cover an emergency dental surgery. But the real breakthrough came from someone I never expected. Their housekeeper, Maria. I found her through social media and arranged a meeting. She was hesitant at first, her eyes wary as we sat across from each other in a quiet cafe. But when I explained who I was, her demeanor shifted. "You're the daughter?" she asked, her voice soft with disbelief. "The one they never talk about." Her words hit me like a gut punch, but I swallowed the pain and nodded. Over coffee, Maria revealed years of overheard conversations and incriminating details. She'd seen it all. The lavish parties, the extravagant purchases, the bank statements and investment reports carelessly left in plain sight. And she'd taken photos. They had these parties, Maria said, scrolling through her phone. Big celebrations whenever their investments paid off. They called them success parties. The video she showed me made my stomach churn. It was from 3 months ago, the same week I'd been hospitalized for exhaustion after working triple shifts. There were my parents, dressed to the nines, clinking champagne glasses with Marcus. To our perfect little family, Dad toasted in the video, his voice dripping with pride, and to Emma, wherever she is, still building that character. They laughed. All of them laughed. Maria had more. Years of events, photos, receipts, videos, all times seemed to align with my struggles. But it was what she said next that stopped me cold. "They talked about you sometimes," she said quietly, about how the experiment was going. "Your mother?" She kept a journal. The journal. That was the key, the final piece of the puzzle. But getting it wouldn't be easy. 2 days later, my parents left for the Maldives. Maria, now fully on my side, confirmed the house was empty except for her. This was my chance. Breaking into their home, my childhood home, felt surreal. Maria had left the journal hidden in the guest room dresser, just as we planned. I grabbed it and fled before my resolve could falter. Later that night, I sat in my apartment, the journal trembling in my hands. The pages were filled with my mother's tidy handwriting, chronicling every detail of their twisted experiment, every struggle they'd imposed on me, every lie they'd told, every milestone in their carefully orchestrated deception. But it wasn't just about the money. The further I read, the darker the truth became. This wasn't just greed or a misguided attempt at building character. This was something far more sinister, far more personal. And as I closed the journal, one thing became clear. My family's betrayal ran far deeper than I could have ever imagined. I rode the elevator to my parents' penthouse. Clutching the key, Maria had slipped me. With them basking in the Maldives, the apartment was silent, the kind of silence that amplified the weight of my anger. The stark contrast between their opulent home and my cramped studio felt like a punch to the gut. The penthouse reeked of excess, marble floors, glittering chandeliers, art pieces I recognized from museum catalogs. It wasn't a home, it was a shrine to wealth. Maria's directions to my mother's study were precise. Cream and gold decor, floor-to-ceiling windows that framed a breathtaking view of the city I'd only ever seen from below. On the desk, I found it. A leather-bound journal, just as Maria had described. My hands shook as I opened it. The first entry was dated 16 years ago. Thomas's experiment with the children is proceeding as planned. Marcus shows signs of breaking already. He's begun asking questions about our finances. But Emma, she's perfect for this. So trusting, so determined. We'll see how long she lasts. I had to stop, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't about teaching responsibility or building character. This was calculated cruelty, a sick game to see how far they could push me. Another entry from 5 years ago twisted the knife further. Emma got accepted to Princeton today. Full scholarship, too. Thomas says we should discourage her, and Ivy League education might expose her to people who know about our businesses. Better to keep her locals struggling. It's fascinating how adaptable she is. My chest tightened with every word. The sacrifices I'd made, the dreams I'd given up. They weren't just collateral damage. They were intentional. But the most chilling entry was dated just last month. The experiment has yielded unexpected results. Emma's determination to succeed despite manufactured hardship has surpassed all projections. Thomas suggests we might need to increase pressure, perhaps orchestrate a job loss or medical emergency. Marcus thinks it's gone too far, but he won't intervene. He enjoys his position too much to risk it. They weren't done. They were planning to push me even harder, just to see if I would break. But what I found next made my blood freeze. Tucked between the journal's pages was a letter from my grandmother, written shortly before her death. The fortune is not yours to use as you please. It belongs to Marcus and Emma, held in trust with strict conditions to ensure they're raised responsibly. Betraying this trust would be a crime and a betrayal of everything our family stands for. It wasn't even their money. The entire fortune, the lifestyle they paraded while I struggled, was meant for me and Marcus. They'd violated the trust and committed fraud on a scale that could ruin them. I photographed every page of the journal, the letter, and every incriminating line. My hands trembled as I opened my laptop and began composing emails. To the family lawyer named in the letter, to the trust administrators, and to the financial regulators. But I wasn't done. Maria had told me about the basement storage unit. The key she provided let me in. And there I found it. Boxes of meticulously organized documents. Among them, one file stood out. Emma's trust. Original documents. Inside were records of every fraudulent transfer, every manipulated statement, every forged signature. They'd documented their crimes, so confident I'd never uncover them. As I drove home, my phone buzzed. It was Marcus. Hope you're doing well, sis. We're having an amazing time here. Dad just bought Mom another yacht. I didn't reply. Instead, I smiled, thinking about the emails I'd just sent and the tidal wave about to crash over their idyllic vacation. They wanted to test my character. They were about to meet the woman they created. And she wasn't playing games anymore. The next 3 days were a whirlwind. The trust administrators responded first, launching an immediate investigation. The financial regulators weren't far behind. By the time my parents' plane landed from the Maldives, their empire was already unraveling. I was sitting at Joe's diner when they found out. My phone lit up with calls. First Mom, then Dad, then Marcus. I let everyone vote a voicemail. Instead, I watched through the diner's greasy window as their faces flashed across the evening news. Prominent business couple under investigation for trust fund fraud. The media went into a frenzy. Every detail came to light. The trust fund established by my grandmother. The millions siphoned away. The facade of wealth built on theft and deceit. Reporters dug deep, uncovering how my parents have funneled my inheritance into the lifestyle of yachts and mansions, while leaving me to scrape by in manufactured poverty. Miss Bennett? A voice broke my thoughts. I looked up to see a distinguished older man in a tailored suit. James Harrison. I was your grandmother's attorney. We need to talk. Over coffee, he laid it all out. The trust was worth $75 million, split evenly between Marcus and me. My parents had been appointed as trustees under strict conditions, equal opportunity, equal resources, and equal care for both children. Instead, they drained my half, built their empire, and subjected me to years of psychological manipulation under the guise of building character. The fallout was swift. Their accounts were frozen, property seized, and their polished image shattered. The journal and other documents provided undeniable proof of their crimes. Then came Marcus's panic text. "What have you done?" "They're investigating me, too." He had every reason to be afraid. His complicity, turning a blind eye and benefiting from the stolen funds, made him culpable. Within weeks, the designer suits and flashy watches were traded for an orange jumpsuit. My parents tried everything to salvage the situation. Tearful apologies. Promises to make it right. Even claiming their actions were motivated by love. But no amount of pleading could erase the mountain of evidence. The journal alone was dandy enough to guarantee lengthy prison sentences. Justice, when it came, was merciless. My parents and Marcus were convicted of fraud and embezzlement. The stolen assets were returned to the trust, and the court appointed independent trustees to oversee it. My portion was fully restored. Despite the financial windfall, I kept working at Joe's Diner for a while. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. Those years of hard work had taught me more about perseverance and dignity than my parents' experiment ever could. Today, I run a foundation that helps students from low-income families afford college. The irony isn't lost on me. My parents' cruelty inadvertently inspired me to help others avoid the struggles they forced upon me. Sometimes, I receive letters from them in prison. Mom's last one still echoes in my mind. "We only wanted to make you stronger." They did make me stronger, just not in the way they intended. They taught me resilience, determination, and the importance of justice. Most importantly, they taught me that true character is revealed not through cruelty, but in how you rise above it. Marcus will be out of prison next year. Mom and Dad have a decade left to serve. The Mediterranean yacht is gone, the Aspen house auctioned off, and the offshore accounts emptied. Their perfect family fantasy is nothing more than a distant memory destroyed by their own greed. As for me, I finally took that vacation they never let me have. Standing barefoot on a beach in the Maldives, watching the sun sink into the horizon, I felt a peace I'd never known before. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't just exposing the truth. It's thriving in spite of it.